The Norquist Trap. The broadcast begins in 10 seconds. WDBC Internet Television is on. I am an avatar for Michael P. Borgia. The broadcast, originating from deep behind enemy lines, is brought to you by dailyborg.com. Conservative politics for the thoughtful. Resistance is futile. You will be assimilated. It has become almost a rite of passage among Republican candidates. Thousands over the past few years have signed what is simply called the Pledge. And the author of the Pledge, Grover Norquist, has gained enormous influence over how the Republican Party nominates its candidates. But is the Pledge a good thing? We'll examine that when the broadcast continues in a moment.
Hands can do incredible things. Now they can even help save a life with hands-only CPR. If you see an adult suddenly collapse, just call 911, then push hard and fast in the center of the chest until help arrives. Learn more at handsonlycpr.org.
We're back. Over the past few years, anti-tax advocate Grover Norquist has gotten thousands of Republican candidates at all levels to sign his pledge to agree not to raise taxes under any circumstances unless that increase is met by a corresponding tax cut someplace else. But how wise is this, both as a matter of politics and as a matter of policy? Kristen Jones now joins us.
Thank you. For many Republicans, seeking office without signing the pledge has become almost unthinkable. But it has cornered many Republicans into a place where making a move on comprehensive tax reform is nearly impossible.
To Norquist, the pledge is about more than just the tax rates, isn't it?
Yes, Michael. For Norquist, raising rates is not the only thing that violates the pledge. Norquist also believes that if you remove any of the taxed expenditures from the code, you are also voting to raise taxes, even if you leave the actual rates alone.
That puts Republicans in a corner. Simple modifications of the tax code become impossible to agree to, even if these tax expenditures are ludicrous. So while not taking the pledge might be bad politics, taking it can be an invitation to bad policy.
That's true. Can a Republican senator or representative find himself backed into a corner if there is a disaster of such monumental proportions, such a massive California earthquake, or an asteroid strike, or a Katrina-like hurricane on the East Coast that might merit a temporary increase in tax rates to meet the disaster? Norquist would oppose a tax increase under even these circumstances. The American people need leaders who will make tough calls that are appropriate to the times. While raising taxes is the wrong decision better than 99% of the time, there may come a day when it's absolutely needed. Locking oneself into an ideological trap like this is not good leadership.
That makes what Senator Lindsey Graham did this week very interesting, is it not?
It is. Graham this week became one of the few Republicans who suggested that the pledge is not so ideologically rigid and that he'd be willing to start getting at some of the goodies in the tax code, some of which benefit only a handful of people or businesses. Some protect single entities, like General Electric. Graham has made it clear that his support for these reforms are contingent upon a Democrat coming forward to suggest structural reforms in Social Security and Medicare. So far, that's not likely to happen. Leaving the entitlements in place is as much a holy grail to Democrats as the Norquist pledge has become to Republicans.
Thanks, Kristen. Scandal at the Stanley Cup Finals, when the broadcast continues in a moment.
My uncle called, speech all slurred, complaining his arms numb. He called everyone. He even called my daughter Tiara because she's got a year of nursing. Everyone thinks he needs to go to the doctor, including me. So he said, well, will you take me? I'm like, I'm on the road. He goes, I'll wait. Stroke's no joke. If you or someone you love have symptoms of stroke, don't wait. It may be too late. Dial 911.
Already it has been cited as being the worst call by an umpire or referee since Don Denkinger's infamous botch in the 1985 World Series that delivered the St. Louis Cardinals' defeat from the jaws of victory. WDBC Sports editor Carter Prentice now joins us.
Thanks, Michael. It changed the tide of a championship. The Cardinals were just 2 outs away from the World Series when Denkinger and Corkley ruled Kansas City Royals batter Dan Orta safe at first base when he was out by more than a step. That umpire error triggered a rally that saved the Royals from defeat and forced a Game 7 the Royals would win. Until Monday, it was universally agreed that Denkinger's botched call was the worst officiating mistake in sports history. But NHL referee Dan O'Rourke may have finally knocked Denkinger off the throne with a Game 6 disaster of his own.
The call did change the outcome of Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Finals. And there were so many aspects to it that were critical.
Exactly. First was the call that O'Rourke did make, the boarding call against New Jersey's Steve Bernier. Bernier made a clean hit against Los Angeles defenseman Rob Scuderi. The hit was clean because Scuderi was against the wall, and thus could not have fallen defenseless into it. Therefore, the requirements for assessing a boarding penalty were not met. Scuderi himself aggravated the matter by turning his back on Bernier at the last second. O'Rourke ignored both of these facts in assessing the penalty.
So O'Rourke's first error was in making a call in the first place. Then there was the penalty he assessed.
O'Rourke, if he was going to call anything on Bernier, should have assessed a minor penalty for the reasons we discussed. Scuderi was against the wall and in no danger of being seriously hurt. He was, though, cut on the play. O'Rourke then made a discretionary call to assess a game misconduct against Bernier. He took one bad mistake and immediately compounded it with 2 others. On a major penalty, the man advantage does not expire when a goal is scored. Further, the Devils lost not just Bernier, but another player from their bench who had deserved the major penalty. The Kings went on to score 3 goals they should not have had during the 5-minute penalty.
Then there was the call O'Rourke didn't make.
Right. 7 seconds before Scuderi was hit, Los Angeles forward Jaron Stoll committed a vicious boarding infraction at center ice against New Jersey's Steven Gianta. It likely should have been a major penalty. No call was made. Had O'Rourke gotten that call correctly, the play would have stopped as soon as Scuderi touched the puck in the Los Angeles end. Instead of putting the Devils on a 5-minute power play, which would have been the right call, the Kings went on a 5-minute power play. They subsequently scored 3 goals they should not have.
In the second period, another officiating disaster creates another Kings goal.
There is only one place a linesman should ever be found while play is going on, along the boards and on the line he's responsible for. But with the Kings entering the Devil's zone, linesman Pierre Rasukat inexplicably skated towards the middle and into the path of Devils defenseman Anton Volchenkov. Rasukat's interference directly led to the Kings' 4th goal. Making it worse is that when Rasukat went down and got up bleeding, no official move to stop play as required by rule until after the Kings scored.
Were there any legitimate goals scored in this game?
Yes, ironically by the Devils' Adam Henrique late in the second period. By then the game was out of hand though. But with the competently officiated game, Henrique's goal would have been the game's first. And the team that scored first won each of the previous 5 games. It's a tragedy for both the Devils, who had written half of the greatest sports comeback story in the last 70 years, for the Kings, who see their first title soiled by controversy, and for the game of hockey which takes a black eye at a time it really can't afford it with the labor stoppage on the horizon.
A sad day for a great game and for 2 great teams. Closing thoughts when the broadcast continues in a moment.
When you drive for a living, you buckle up every time, whether you drive one of these or one of these. Truckers know what I'm talking about, because no matter how good a driver you are, trouble can still happen. That's when you want to keep your safety belt on to keep you steady, behind the wheel, in control, and looking out for everybody. Safety is a professional driver's responsibility. Remember, you're the one who drives for a living.
A message from the U.S. Department of Transportation.
The Norquist Pledge, while pleasing conservatives, also locks leaders into an unfortunate corner, depriving them of the ability to bring real change to our tax code because it might offend one man. And one man should never have that kind of influence over an entire political party. If I were to sign the tax pledge as a candidate, I would make it perfectly clear that I do view it as not being absolute. National crisis will put the pledge aside. And it only applies to actual tax rates, not tax expenditures. As for the tragedy of the Stanley Cup Finals, at least it happened in Los Angeles. Only in Tinseltown would you find enough silver polish to get all the stains off the Stanley Cup. You have been assimilated.